One question that comes up quite frequently, especially from newer blacksmiths, is the question of should I make my tools or should I buy my tools? And the answer is definitely yes, which is an awfully vague answer, but it's the obvious one in my book, is it's going to take some combination of both. Certainly if you go back through history and look at the very first blacksmiths in the very early days of the Iron Age, they had no choice but to make most of their tools. Although they did have the benefit of Stone Age and Bronze Age tools, which means their anvil was probably a rock and their hammer was probably a rock, and they probably had a bronze axe for processing timber into charcoal to use as a fuel. Their forges were probably just dug out of the ground. But unless that's what you want to do in blacksmithing, if you want to reenact and recreate those days, have fun. I'm probably not the guy to help guide you. I have no knowledge of how that was really done. That would be a big project, but it might be interesting. So in today's age, we have the advantage that there are tools everywhere. They may seem hard to find at first, but if you start looking, they're out there. You can buy new tools. You can buy tools made by other blacksmiths. You can buy tools made by tool manufacturers. Lots of options. And I think to buy tools initially or to acquire them somehow is the way to go. Now, building a forge from scratch sounds like the economical bargain way to get a first forge. And if all you can afford is a hole in the ground with some charcoal you've made from scrap lumber and a hairdryer for a blower, then that's what you have to do. But if you want a real forge, trying to build one from scratch is a lot of work. If you have a full metal fabrication shop at your disposal, it's pretty easy. But if you're just starting out and don't have anything, you might want to look for one that you can borrow, or somebody's got one in their barn that they're willing to give away or sell cheap. New coal forges and new propane forges can be expensive, I realize that. But they're good quality equipment, and you probably won't regret owning it in the long run. My coal forge features a cast iron fire pot from Centaur Forge. If I wanted to, I could weld up a plate iron fire pot, but that's a lot more work than buying the cast iron fire pot. And in the long run, the cast iron fire pot will last me a lifetime, and the plate steel one might not. And a brake drum is usable. A lot of people make some fairly decent forges out of brake drum, but again, you have to have the tools and equipment to do that, and it still will not be quite as nice as a proper cast iron fire pot. This little propane forge I mentioned in an earlier video is one I built. It was really quite simple, but again, you have to be able to cut heavy tubing. You have to be able to put holes in it. You have to be able to drill and tap threads. So there is some welding and machining and fabricating, and if you have those skills, there are lots of plans on the internet for building simple gas forges. If you don't have those skills, you're pretty well stuck buying one. To a large extent, the same thing goes for anvils. I have seen people online who have built big anvils, 100 plus pound anvils, starting with plate and doing a very nice job of fabricating. But you need big equipment, big welders, and you need to have the skills to do that. If you're just starting out, you're probably not going to be able to build your own anvil. So building an anvil is not really much of an option. There are options if you can't find a proper anvil or can't afford one. Anvils are expensive. And we're going to do a separate video about anvils and some of the anvil substitutes. But what we're really talking about when we talk about making or buying tools is all of this stuff. And when you start out, we've discussed making tongs without having tongs to make tongs with. And that will work. This is the pair that we made in that video, or two videos. And these are perfectly suitable tongs if you want to tackle a project like that. But if you have other things you want to do, if you're trying to make gifts or just learn blacksmithing in general, maybe you should buy tongs to start with. These are all store-bought tongs. They're very good. They're all still styles that are available from most of the blacksmithing suppliers, and there are links to some of those down in my video description. The other thing is to buy tongs that are secondhand if you get lucky. The problem is a lot of secondhand tongs look like this when you find them in antique stores, and they want $30 or $40 for some piece of junk like this. I don't think I paid anything for these, but you could make those work, but for that same $30 or $40 you can buy some of those Kins Custom Iron quick tongs and get some very good tongs out of the deal if you're willing to work on them and make them. Or you can make something like this for a little bit less if you want to put more time into it. But for maybe $45 or $50 a pair, you can get tongs like this and be off and running and working much faster without frustrating yourself. Same thing goes with hammers. Store-bought hammers, hammers that I've made, but I didn't make my first hammer till I've been blacksmithing for quite some time. This one that I use quite often in the videos, I probably made 10 or 15 years ago. So it was 15 years into my blacksmithing evolution before I made a hammer that I was happy enough with to use all the time. These hammers are made by other blacksmiths, and that's actually the more expensive option. You can buy a good hammer from one of the tool suppliers. You'll need to modify the handle, and I'll talk about that in another video, because I think these are way too heavy. But those are good hammers. They're pretty affordable. They make them in lots of different styles, lots of different weights, and they're classic blacksmithing hammers. You can't go wrong. But these cost more money because somebody's putting time and effort into what's essentially a custom or semi-custom hammer. This one from William Bastos, this one from Stuart Shirley, and I really like these hammers. They're my favorite to use, partly because they're great hammers, but partly because I know where they came from, and I've met the smiths, I talked to them, I got to know them a little bit before I bought their tool, and that makes them really special to me. Other tools you find used, I've never bought a new swedge, but they're available new, but you can find these in garage sales sometimes, estate sales, auctions, and they show up on eBay all the time. And these are harder to make. A swedge like this isn't too bad to make yourself, although this is an antique. But buying antiques at auctions and stuff, although auctions can get out of hand, this is the swedge we made the other day and one of the Hardys I made the other day. So you can make these. When it really comes down to needing to make tools, though, are punches, chisels, drifts, and all of these little tools like this. You will go make hundreds of these in your blacksmithing evolution. Most of them are not available for sale. If you find them used, they will be beat to death. They will be rusty. You may or may not be able to salvage them, although sometimes you can salvage them and make new tools out of the old steel. And sometimes you'll find drifts at sales or antique stores, and people don't really know what they are, so they actually can turn out to be a good deal if you get lucky to find a drift. Being a good scrounger is another way to get tools. Letting your friends, your neighbors, your family, the people you work with know that you're interested in blacksmithing and that you're looking for tools oftentimes pays off. The other day I mentioned cleaning up and finding this old V Fuller. It's not one I made, it's not one I bought. It was in a box of stuff that looked vaguely blacksmithing related that somebody found cleaning up an old shed, and they left it on my doorstep. I know who that was, but at the time I had to ask around. But he found this stuff, and he knew I might be interested in it. Most of it was junk. It was just scrap iron, old nuts and bolts and stuff like that. But there were some hammer and axe eye drifts in there. There was a couple of bottom fullers in there and bottom swedges, and there was this nice top tool. So if you get the word out, things might find you. And the longer you do this, the more of that happens. Occasionally I get a phone call from somebody that says, I've got this stuff, it was my grandfather's, I don't have room for it, what do I do with it? Now, I never shortchange anybody on a deal like that. If I go look at that and it's good stuff and I want it, I will offer them a fair price. I don't want to cheat anybody, I don't want to take advantage of them not knowing what they've got. But I will, if I don't want it, I will try to let other people know it's available. I have actually bought a bunch of that stuff knowing that all I was going to do was sell it for exactly what I paid for it to other blacksmiths, just to help the people out and to help the blacksmithing community out. So sometimes you get a deal like that. Keep your eyes and ears open. What I wouldn't do is go steal that anvil that's a yard ornament in somebody's flower bed. One thing, it's probably an old rusty beat up anvil you don't want anyways, but stealing things isn't good karma. Knock on their door, ask them, hey, are you interested in selling that? I'm taking up blacksmithing and I really need an anvil. I'd appreciate it. And they might sell it to you. People are hard up for money these days. You never know. But also, if it's been sitting in the dirt for the last 20 years, it may be so rusted that it's just not worth salvaging. But anyways, that's my take. You're going to need to make tools. You're going to need to borrow tools. You're going to need to buy tools, scrounge tools. They're out there. eBay, auctions, estate sales. Keep your eyes and ears open. Get involved with a local blacksmithing group. Those guys are the ones that have tools they're not using anymore. They have good forges that they've upgraded, and they're willing to sell the old forge to a beginner at a reasonable price. In the meantime, I wish you luck finding the stuff. I hope it's not too hard and that you live in an area where some of this is available. I know sometimes you got to make do with things that are less than ideal, and if that's what you got to do, then that's just the way it's going to be. I hope this video was helpful to you. I know it didn't necessarily answer questions. It may have told you what you already knew, but sometimes it helps to confirm that. Anyways, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. We'll do more blacksmithing in future videos. We've got lots of projects and lots of thought processes we're already working on, and we will continue with all of those in the near future. In the meantime, get out to your shop, try and make something. Get out and scrounge around the countryside, look for some tools. You might have a nice outing that way. But stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and take care.